Greetings, this is your final exam review. So World History 1030. This is what we're going to do here is talk about your exam review. Now one thing, I told you I was going to try for a word bank. I tried really hard for a word bank. Yeah, I tried the word bank and ended up becoming self-aware. If it did not work, it would cause bleed over between questions where you pick one from one question, put it on another, and then the next question would default to the one you picked for the next question. It became self-aware. It was threatening my children, so we just got rid of it. At any rate, so what we're going to do is fill in the blank. Now, this is where it's going to be critical. Spelling and punctuation is going to be important on this test. Make sure you spell it correctly. Make sure you use proper punctuation. Now, because of the nature of this test, I'm going to give you 3 chances, and the fact it's not going to be proctored. So you get 3 opportunities to take this test, just like you did for your quiz. Because you all signed up for a lecture, you didn't sign up for this, so we're gonna back off on the test a little bit. Plus, I know some folks have weird internet connections. Some folks are sharing computers with parents or siblings or spouses, so we're going to work with that. Significant others. So what we're going to do now is go over the test a little bit. Now, when you get to the fill in the blank, I'm going to give you an alibi. When it comes up and you can review the questions, if you go through it, we're going to use the honor system. When you go through the fill in the blanks, and make sure, and on anything you got wrong, make sure your spelling and punctuation was good. If it was a spelling or punctuation issue, and not that you'd got it completely boloed, go ahead and retake the test and fix the spelling and punctuation so that you get a good to go on there on that question. If it was a screw up where you just totally lost it and didn't know what the answer, had no clue what the answer was, just make sure it's wrong the next time you do it as well. Fair is fair. So we're going to use the honor system on that because, like I said, this test is very, we don't really have a good proctoring system in place. I don't want to limit you because I understand a lot of y'all are doing, a lot of you guys are critical employees. Some of you are working more than you did before this test. Some of y'all I know are locked down in less than optimal circumstances. So we're going to work with you and let you, and I'm going to let you do a little bit of grading yourself, and I'm going to rely on the honor system on this. Like I said, what it ended up being, I deleted some questions that were kind of complex. So what we ended up with was 60 total questions plus 5 bonus questions. So you have a total of 60 questions. How that'll work is I will recalculate this by 60. I will take whatever your score is from 65. I will recalculate it to 60, and that will be your exam grade. So if you have any questions on that, contact me, and we will work with that. Another thing is this review will more than likely be posted on YouTube because apparently they're cracking down on certain professors who dump huge files on the announcements. Not that we know anybody like that. So it'll probably be put on YouTube, and I'll give you a link to that. If you have any trouble accessing the link, of course you won't be hearing this, but I will put an appropriate message in on announcements, and we'll work from there. So let's get started. So the format of the test is essentially the exact same as when you take a quiz on Canvas, only it's going to be 65 total questions. Like I said, 5 of these are bonus, and 60 of them are the ones that are for grade. So question 1 is the founder of the fascist party was a pre-World War I socialist politician named Benito Mussolini who assumed power on a totalitarian basis in 1922. That is a true statement. So the next one is the leader of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, launched his first Soviet 5-year plan in 1928. That too is a true statement. So next we go to if we go to another question, and it happens to say a key factor in Adolf Hitler's rise to power in 1933 was the opinion of many conservative German thought leaders, such as industrialists, landed aristocrats, military leaders, both admirals and generals, academics and high-level bureaucrats within the German government believed that in favoring the National Socialists over the Communists, they were choosing the lesser of two evils, and that the Nazis would be a buffer to protect Germany from communist takeover. Again, if I was a betting man, I would bet that's a true statement. So you may be reading along, you come to something that sounds a little bit like, according to the authors of our text, the primary motivation for the eventual Japanese attack and declaration of war on the United States was the American sanctions, which cut off the Japanese empire from commercial access to U.S.-produced petroleum products, iron ore, and scrap metal, in response to the Japanese demands in 1940 for access to commercial and military assets in French Indochina. You know, I think that just might be true. So if you happen to run across, say you're just thinking of a question and it happens to be in the 5 years following World War II, the Soviet Union reduced levels of investment in heavy industry and military spending in order to increase the production of consumer goods. No. I don't think that's true at all. You make the call, but I think that one's false. So in the 1946 to 49 Chinese Civil War, a major factor in the collapse of the Chinese nationalist forces in the summer of 1949 was the Soviet Union's direct intervention with 3 Soviet army groups, complete with tanks, artillery, and tactical aviation, in support of Mao Zedong's communist forces. And not so much. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that's a no on me. So following independence, suppose you're talking about the following independence from the United States in 1946, the Republic of the Philippines quickly established a stable, democratic form of government that had no major internal conflicts. No, not so much. They had some serious issues. So I'd say that'd be false if you get that one. So question 8 is, following the communist victory in the 1946 to 1949 Chinese Civil War, China and the Soviet Union remained close allies until the 1980s. Not so much. Maoism versus Marxist-Leninism, they weren't friends. Some of the bitterest rivalries you ever see are various forms of socialism that don't like each other. I refer you back to the Nazis and the communists earlier. So if we should talk about the Brits, and they say with the end of the British colonial government in India, India was partitioned into 2 separate countries, Muslim majority Pakistan and Hindu majority India. Yes, it was 2 when they were partitioned. Later it would become 3, but that's not till 1971. So I would say that's a true statement. So another question, like maybe a sixth of the way through, hint, like of your main questions, is Indonesia's experiment following their 1950 independence from the Netherlands in guided democracy under Sukarno ended. It failed, and President Sukarno was overthrown by the Indonesian military in 1965. Yep, I'm going to call that one true. And then now there might be a question there. It's important to remember the context. Remember, the Brits were big on indirect rule until, as the 1950s progressed, the British colonial authorities in Africa increased the power of local chieftains and other traditional leaders at the expense of locally and regionally elected governing bodies. False. By the 1950s, they'd reversed their earlier course and were trying to bring credit to the colonial, soon-to-be independent governments. So we come to question 12, and it may ask you, under the chancellorship of Konrad Adenauer, the Federal Republic of West Germany, Bundesrepublik Deutschland, West Germany, entered a period of economic decline, and the West German economy was eclipsed in the late 1960s by the surging economy facilitated by the communist policies of the Democratic Republic of East Germany, the Deutsche Demokratische Republik. Yeah, not so much. They have built a wall to keep people from fleeing west, not trying to get into the East. So I would call that false if you happen to see it. So we get on. So as you're going along, you might be doing a test. You might see something along the lines of most African colonies achieved some form of independence from their colonial overlords in the decade between 1957 to 1967. Yeah, I'm going to put that one down as true. About the only exceptions were Rhodesia. Um, well, even they achieved a form of independence, so not so much them. So basically, the Portuguese colonies were the only ones that, you know, so other than the Portuguese colony, almost all of them were independent by 1967. So if we're talking about the United States during this series of questions, what are, and then we ask what are two notable incidents in the United States during the 1960s that had both internal and two notable incidents in the United States during the 1960s that had both internal and international repercussions were the Civil Rights Movement and the Anti-Vietnam War movement. Yeah, I'd call that true. Although, I'll leave that alone. So anyways, if you're going along, say exactly 1/4 of the way through the graded questions, and you get a question that says, when the Middle Eastern and North African Arab countries severed their colonial relationships with the outside power, the one primary point of agreement among the emerging Arab powers was the issue of Palestine. Yeah, that's true, because remember, all of them could pretty much agree they didn't want to see a Jewish state in the Middle East. So that was pretty much our agreement. Now let's go on to question 16. Oh, wait, did I say that out loud? According to our text, one notable problem in Southeast Asia was that independence did not create economic equality or material prosperity and didn't address foreign influence. According to our text, that's true. Question 17, it's so blindingly obvious with what are the current events in the world, I almost don't want to read it, but the Tiananmen Square incident resulted in political liberalization in China and a reduction of the political power of the Communist Party. No. That is a no. So that's false. And then you might come to a question that says, following the eclipse of the communist system in Eastern Europe, one of the major causes of instability in Europe was the disintegration of Yugoslavia due to the reemergence of Balkan nationalism. Yeah, I have been there, done that, have the T-shirt on that one. So I'm going to put true. You put whatever your grade can handle. So we get to 19, and it's the Soviet Union disintegrated due to the economic effects of a Muslim uprising in the Central Asian Soviet Socialist republics. No, that's false. So we get to question 20. What notable difference between the Western world and the Muslim world in the modern era is the role of women in society? That is true. So we get to another one now we get to ones that are probably going to be multiple choice after this, maybe a third of the way through the test of 60 questions. So you might get the one that says, between the summer of 1939 and the summer of 1941, the Soviet Union was most closely allied with which country? And your choices are Nazi Germany, France, Great Britain, and Finland. I would go with Nazi Germany on that one. Now going along, should I ask you, the battles of Stalingrad and Kursk took place in which country? I would put the Soviet Union myself. And then if you're going along and say in the post-independence era, Pakistan, and it says, and you see, was riven by internal and external conflict caused by the cultural, geographic, linguistic, and governance issues, which resulted in several wars and the independence of Bangladesh in 1971. I'd go with that one. So if you were ever asking yourself, what was the trigger for the United States declaration of war on Germany, Japan, and Italy? I'd say it was probably the surprise attack on the main U.S. Pacific Fleet base at Pearl Harbor and other Hawaiian military installations by the Japanese Navy in conjunction with coordinated Japanese attacks on the Philippines and other U.S. possessions in the Central Pacific. At least that's what I think. Since I wrote the test, you might want to take that into consideration. Okay, question 25. Ooh, wait, did I say that out loud again? Darn. Anyways, according to our text, many nationalist and anti-colonialist Asians initially welcomed the Japanese seizure of the European and U.S. colonies due to Japanese promises under a policy of Asia for the Asiatics and part of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. This resulted in a combination of increasing disillusionment with Japanese brutality, passive resistance, localized guerrilla warfare against the Japanese and local authorities, and localized support to Allied forces engaged against the Japanese, as well as attempts by local authorities working for the Japanese established national governments to mitigate Japanese policies detrimental to the local populations. I'd probably go with that one. I kind of like that answer. Actually, I like the one that has to do with guerrilla fighting, but that was more or less just the Philippines and Vietnam. So if you're going along and you should happen to ask yourself, following the defeat of the nationalist forces by the Chinese Communists, the island of Taiwan, and the answer, of course, you'll answer yourself, is became a stronghold for the defeated nationalists who established a competing Chinese government that was stable and became a major economic and industrial power by the 1970s. So if you were ever sitting there thinking, following the death of Joseph Stalin, the leadership of the Soviet Union generally was to pursue a policy of, and you think, peaceful coexistence with Western Europe and the United States while supporting revolutionary movements and facilitating the establishment of communist and Marxist governments in the developing world. You're really smart. Great geopolitical thought there. So, according to our text, one of the main factors, the final straw in the Soviet Politburo's decision to remove Nikita Khrushchev for office in 1964 was foreign policy failures such as the abortive attempt to place nuclear missiles in Cuba during the autumn of 1962 that triggered the Cuban Missile Crisis. Remember some of these answers. They'll become important later. Following the communist victory in the Chinese Civil War in late 1949, the new communist government policies were, I would say it was the new democracy and land reform, followed by the transition of socialism, which included the Great Leap Forward, and then after the failure of the commune policy, the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. And then mercifully for the Chinese people, Mao died after that. Unmercifully left his crap government in place. So if you're coming to the halfway point and you get a question that says, according to our text, the primary cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union was, there's actually two right answers here, but the one the book likes, because remember it's according to our text, is the contradictions inherent in the Soviet system combined with its massive economic inefficiencies and multi-ethnic strains among the Soviet population. They just don't like Ronald Reagan in the book. But yeah, we'll go with, because obviously his stuff wouldn't have worked if that hadn't been the main problem. Well, just after you pass halfway, you might run into, while there were many contributing factors in the eclipse of Great Britain during the 3 decades following the conclusion of the Second World War, the main factors in the breakup of the empire and the Commonwealth was, well, of course, economics is upstream of capabilities, national capabilities. So it was the continued relative decline of the British economy as a result of wartime dislocation. Also, that democratic socialism stuff be expensive. Now, according to our text, some of the stress of German reunification was caused by the economic stress caused by the cost of German reunification. And then, if you're wondering about Latin America, and we're thinking that following the Cuban Revolution of 1959, one of the major struggles within Latin America, and you answer yourself, a three-way contest for regional political economic domination between Marxist movements supported by Cuba and the Communist bloc, traditional Latin American governing entities who often ruled through military or military-backed dictatorships, and democratic elected Latin American governments. Yeah, I'd go with that one. So if you were wondering, after independence from colonial rule, what Burma did, they attempted to establish a British-style parliamentary democracy dedicated to Buddhism and nonviolent Marxism, which failed and was overthrown by a military junta. And then, if you ask yourself, following the 1979 revolution, Iran was a blank as a blank. So it was ruled by blank as a blank. So if you're thinking Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini as an Islamic theocracy, I think you're on it. Just my opinion. Now, as you're thinking about the Israeli-Arab conflicts, all 4 or 5, whatever you want to call it, you have to remember that Israeli justified the invasion of Jordanian-occupied of the West Bank during the 6 Days Wars due to the fact that the Arab powers, and influenced by Egyptian dictator Gamal Abdel Nasser, had blockaded the Gulf of Aqaba, and Jordan had entered in a military alliance with Egypt. I would just remember that. That seems important. This is Trapo Chico. It's not beer. I know what you all are thinking. So if you're thinking to yourself, a major obstacle to success of the newly independent African countries was, and you're thinking about inadequate transportation infrastructure, poorly developed industrial assets, agriculture, general government corruption, a lack of qualified, honest leaders, and a lack of education, and the lingering economic, political, social, and diplomatic legacies of colonialism, neo-colonials. Yeah, I'd just say all those answers are correct myself. So, according to our authors, the authors of our work in the mid-60s, many African authors changed the focus of their writing from subjects related to colonialism and its inherent social and economic inequalities to critiques of the corruption, brutality, incompetence, and inequities present in the newly independent African countries. Let's see if that works. Better, because I haven't hit shuffle answers yet. According to our text, one of the major challenges in the unity of the newly independent African countries was the lingering force of regionalism. They're trying to be very polite and say the tribes came roaring back, and yep, that's what happened. Following independence from Great Britain, India embarked on a governing policy of democratic socialism. When it comes to that free stuff, the apple didn't fall far from the tree on this one. So now we get into our fill in the blanks. The dictator from the Soviet Union, from his death until 1926 until 1953, let's see here. I would say Stalin, at capital Stalin, was known for his distrust of the subordinates, regardless of past loyalty, a near constant cycle of purges of both Communist Party and the state institution at all levels, and paranoia. Like I said, capital Stalin, or Joseph Stalin if you're feeling ambitious. The most common date to use to mark the beginning of the Second World War in Europe was the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany on, and I like to use number 1 and then spell out September, September, and that's capital September, and then space 1939. So number 1, space, September, capital September, space 1939. Yeah, the fill in the blanks, they'd be like that, The NSDAP was a political party that governed, and then I would put Germany, capital Germany, and then put a slash because it's a two-part question, prior to and during World War II. The English translation of this political party is the National Socialist German, capital German, Workers' Party. So it should look something like that when you're complete. At a speech at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri in March 1946, you can just use Winston Churchill's last name. Oh, you only have to do the last name, but we'll go extra innings here. Winston, capital capital WINSTON, space, capital CHURCHILL. Winston Churchill. The European Recovery Program, which dedicated US $13 billion, that's in the neighborhood of about 25 times that today, to European reconstruction and economic recovery in order to counteract the popular appeal of international communist policies was and still is usually referred to as the blank plan. So Marshall, MARSHALL. I say it, capital MARSHALL, Marshall. Now, when you think about the Japanese Constitution, one notable feature of the 1947, because I know you all think about it all the time, one notable feature of the 1947 Japanese Constitution was a renunciation and prohibition of blank and the maintenance of military forces as an instrument of government policies. So I would just say war, capital WAR. The United States implemented the blank doctrine, which promised to aid any country threatened by a communist domination or a communist takeover. It was a framework for President Truman's policy of providing military and economic aid to Greece and Turkey in 1947. So that I would say TRUMAN, capital TRUMAN, Truman. Okay. Now, if we're talking, let's think about the Berlin airlift for a little while. The U.S. and the British and French, the U.S., British, and French responded to the Soviet blockade of Berlin between October of 1947 and May of 1949 was the initiation of the Berlin airlift. How do we spell this? BERLIN, capital BERLIN, space, capital AIRLIFT. And then when you're thinking about what was going on elsewhere in the world, Blank was the leader of communist mainland China from late 1949 till his death in 1976. I would say Mao, capital M-A-O. So right now you might be thinking there's 50 states and I'm on question blank, which would be true. So question 50 is the U.S. Allied response to the invasion across the interim 38th parallel border of the Republic of South Korea by the Democratic Republic People's Republic of blank or North Korea on 25 on 25 June 1950 is authorized by the United Nations Security Council, is referred to as Korean War, Korean conflict, but I will do war. Capital Korean, capital WAR. Okay, number 51 is one of the consequences of the communist takeover of China was the Chinese takeover of Taiwan, or sorry, Tibet, capital T-I-B-E-T. So we're going along, and in a private speech to the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party in February 1956, Nikita Khrushchev initiated the policy that created some unrest both within the Soviet Communist Party and with the Soviet public at large due to the earlier Stalinist cult of personality. So if he's getting rid of something, it's de-Stalinization. S-T-A-L-I-N-A-Z-I-O-N. De-Stalin. So let's respell that. D-E-S-T-A-L-I-N-A-I-Z-I-O-N. De-Stalinization. Let's just get some power to it. So question 53, the Hungarian Revolution against the Soviet occupation and the resulting Warsaw Pact invasion of Hungary occurred in the year 1956. 1956. Let's go back to 52 quick. I misspelled de-Stalinization. Let's try de-Stalinization again. S-D-E-S-T-A-L-I-N-I-Z-A-T-I-O-N. I realized I misspelled it. So, come to 54. Following the Korean armistice of 1953, the Korean armistice of 1953, South Blank implemented an export-driven manufacturing economy which surpassed North Blank in the late 1960s and led to South Blank emergence as a world manufacturing power. I would put Korea. K-O-R-E-A. Just me, though. So, as president of France after World War II, Blank established the French Fifth Republic, which consolidated French political power in the office of the presidency, encouraged economic growth, and facilitated France's emergence as a nuclear power in 1960. I put de Gaulle. D-E, capital D-E, and then capital G-A-U-L-L-E, de Gaulle. So we come to the next one. One of the greatest social changes in Europe and the Americas during the post-World War II era was the rise of the feminist movement or women's movement. Either one will work. Let's go with feminist. Feminist, or the women's movement, whichever works better. I just prefer feminist because not all women like the women's movement. Fulgencio Batista, the Cuban dictator, was opposed by several revolutionary factions during the 1953 to 59 Cuban Revolution, which was eventually overthrown on 1 January 1959 and replaced with Fidel Castro, capital Fidel, capital space, capital Castro. The U.S. President blank was responsible for the expansion of the Second Indochina War, Vietnam War, and the introduction of U.S. contract troops in Vietnam. Ivo Johnson, capital Johnston. I say again, capital Johnsson. So I was thinking of somebody else. Prior to the 1979 revolution, the Shah of Iran, I spell capital Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was considered a leading pro-American ruler in the region, especially after the overthrow of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. So your last regularly graded question is the treaty covering the existing European community and the current European Union went into effect in what year? 1994. Mao Zedong's Communist Forces declared the People's Republic of China on 1 October in a year 1949. The official name for the nationalist Chinese government on Taiwan is the Republic of China. You can also go ROC for short, R-O-C, capital R, capital O, capital C. Republic of China. In August of 1961, the Berlin blank was built, separating the free and communist sectors of Berlin. That's Wall, W-A-L-L, or Mauer if you want to do it in German. Berlinischer Mauer. Question 64. The blank, and you can put USSR, so installed intermediate range ballistic missiles in Cuba, triggering the Cuban Missile Crisis. That'd be the Soviet Union. S-O-V-I-E-T, space, capital U-N-I-O-N, or USSR, all caps, also works. As does Russia. Operation Desert Storm was the U.S.-led military operation to remove Iraqi invading forces from the country of blank. I would try Kuwait myself. K-U-W-A-I-T. Been there many times. It rhymes with U-wait. Okay. There we go. So looks like we're pretty smart today, because you guys have been sending me this stuff from ESP. I know you know all the answers, and you're gonna kick ass. The thing I'm most concerned about is the spelling and punctuation piece, and the fill in the blanks. So that concludes our review session. Like I said, you'll have from Monday night until Monday the 20th through Monday the 27th to actually take this test. I will do a Zoom session on Monday for a final question and answer before the review. I also expect to see your essays by the midnight on the 20th. And so you have one day of overlap between when you can take your exam and when you can turn in your essays. You're welcome. So contact me or call me with any questions, and I look forward to hearing about seeing all your bright, shiny faces on Zoom, since I can't see y'all in person. So till later, this is Professor Kaserman out.